I also want to thank the World Affairs Council, and I want to thank Town Hall for this merged meeting. It's very special. I'm delighted to be here. This morning we had a good morning. One of the big issues that's confronting us is child trafficking. And so this morning I had received your sheriff, as well as 2 members of the Board of Supervisors in Washington some time ago. And Sheriff McDonald said that what the situation was in Los Angeles with respect to child trafficking. So this morning we had a meeting with the sheriff, with the chief of police, with the DA of LA and Oakland and San Diego, and the FBI, and a large number of other people who were integrally involved in child trafficking. Ladies and gentlemen, it is one huge problem. The average child is 12 to 14 years old. Children are sold on the internet. I've just been able to do an amendment to a bill, which is now law, which seeks to prevent that from happening. I've been writing letters to the 6 big hotel chains saying, please participate in a code of conduct. I think we're beginning to mobilize a real law enforcement effort against it, and also an effort to take children, 12 years old, who are sold, who are moved, who are trafficked for sex, who are used in the most bizarre and terrible ways, and find other ways for them to go. So that was my morning. And Terry, it's great for me to be here tonight, and I want to say thank you to the World Affairs Council, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you for coming. I thought we might start with the news of the day, which is that with the announcement that Senator Barbara Mikulski from Maryland is going to support the Iran nuclear deal, the president now has enough votes to override a veto. He has enough votes that they cannot override his veto. And I'm wondering, you were one of the first senators to come out in favor of the deal. The opposition it's been very divisive. The opposition has been partly partisan, but I think there are also some senators and congressmen also women who have genuine problems with this deal. So I'm wondering, as you went through it in your mind, what made you want to support it, and how do you view people who think we could get a better deal on Iran?
Oh, that's a big question. Let me tackle it. There is no better deal. It's this or it's nothing. And the nothing carries with it a possible breakout of Iran in 2 to 3 months. And then the response is military. Iran's a big country, and you can't really fool around. It's not like Syria. And so there would have to be a military attack. I don't know who would conduct it, whether it would be Israel, whether it would be the United States, whether it would be somebody else. But I think where I've gotten a lot of my information is from our Secretary of Energy. Ernest Moniz is a nuclear scientist. He's from MIT. He's done some very special nuclear work. He knows our labs well and has put the Los Alamos to work in some of this analysis. And so I've had 3 dinners with him, with other senators. And what he has said to us is that every pathway to a bomb is blocked. The uranium pathway is blocked, the plutonium pathway is blocked, and the covert pathway is blocked. And so the conclusion is that this can prevent Iran from moving toward a bomb for 15 years. And in order to have sanctions relief, Iran has to comply with a number of strictures in terms of the downgrading and the removal of materials subject to 24/7 inspection by the IAEA. There are those that think, well, America should just put back our sanctions. The fact of the matter is, Sanctions work when they're global. And in this instance, this effort was really begun by the European Parliament, and sanctions are levied by Russia, by China, by the UK, by France, by Germany, and by us. So together, they make a big difference. If we back out when we have led the effort at the negotiation, what it says to these other countries who have accepted it, the Security Council has voted unanimously to approve it, that they're going to drop their sanctions. Therefore, the question comes, does United States sanctions mean much? And the fact of the matter is, to have them mean much, we would have to sanction allied interests, which I suspect we would not be willing to do. Allied banks who would do business with Iran. And you can look at the particulars of the deal. And I've been in the Senate for 22 years. I've been on the Intelligence Committee for 15 years. I've been chairman of the committee for 6 and ranking member since then. So I've seen all of the intelligence. And I think our technical means are much better than they were back in '94, when I believe there was a program. I also know this foreign minister, Javed Zarif. I met him in 2005 when he was the the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations. I spent hours with him, and he was determined to change the pathway of Iran. Now that he is Rouhani's foreign minister, he has had a chance to do that. And if you look at the population of Iran, 88% of whom are under the age of 54, it's a young population. The problem there, in my view, are the Ayatollahs. But the Rouhani government wants to be a moderate government, wants to move Iran in a different direction. And the nuclear experts say there has never been a nuclear agreement that is any stronger than this one. As a matter of fact, it's the strongest. Now, the problem comes, obviously, we support Israel. I'm Jewish. My family, my grandfather was a stowaway to avoid pogroms from Poland. He stowed away at the age of 14. He came to this country. And this country, you know, has offered so much to newcomers. Having said that, there's not going to be another agreement. And the sanctions do not come off until they have completed a whole retinue of what they have to do with the reactor, with all of the plutonium elements, with the uranium elements, and that's all very specific, as you know. So I believe we have the votes now on the Democratic side to sustain a veto. The question is whether there are going to be votes to go further, and that I don't know, and I don't know what the majority leader is going to do in terms of how he's going to bring this to the floor. But we go back next week, and we go on to the bill Tuesday, and the path will then become clear. But let me say this, ladies and gentlemen. The foreign policy has always been the preserve of the executive branch of government. And I came when Republican presidents were also in power, and there never was this kind of a conflict. When the Bush administration did the Korean agreement, you know, there wasn't this kind of conflict that there is today. And so I recognize the view that the House and the Senate should have a point of view, but I also recognize the fact that it is very important that American executive leadership remains strong and able. I was at the Aspen Strategy Group, and a former prime minister, who is one of our big five, our most trusted allies, said, "We can't believe what you're doing." He said, "You brought us into this, and everybody's accepted it. Everybody's accepted it, except the United States. And now you're going to back away? Why would we ever follow you again?"
But isn't there a legitimate argument that the Saudis and the Israelis say, okay, you've delayed it for 10 years, but that's just 10 years or 15 years. What happens then? And what happens if the Iranians do cheat? Are you really going to snap back sanctions? You know, George Shultz and Henry Kissinger wrote that big piece in the Wall Street Journal several months ago, where they pointed out, you know, if the Iranians cheat, they will do it incrementally. They'll do little steps. So it'll be very hard to get a gotcha moment. So what happens if 10 years, 15 years down the line, they suddenly have a nuclear bomb? Do we then look back on today and think we made a big mistake?
Well, I think you judge that by past performance, and the tentative agreement, which has lasted for over a year and a half, has had no violation. We have had our intelligence people, and the intelligence has improved, sustained that. And I think it points to the future that they will keep this. Now, the question comes, really, can Iran change? You have a moderate government. The Majlis election, and their election is in 2016. We'll see. This government won really to create a more moderate path, and certainly this was part of it. And maybe sanctions were a driving force, but we are where we are. And to turn it down, and there's nothing, what do you think would happen, Terry? What do you think would happen?
You're asking me the questions now.
Well, you see, yeah.
I'll tell you what I think would happen. I think the United States would be very lonely on the world stage. Question is whether or not that will be a legitimate position for the US to be. And I think the president, I mean, he said it before, every decision that gets to my desk, it's not 100% zero. I have to make a judgment call. And I think underneath it all, he's making the judgment call that your friend Zarif and Rouhani will prevail.
Yeah.
But unlike in this country, and I don't have to tell you this, but President Rouhani is not, that's not where the buck stops. It stops at Khamenei, and who knows what the Ayatollahs think. So I think it's a calculated gamble.
The theory is that Iran gives up forever a nuclear warhead program. We know it's blocked for 15 years. Now, is 15 years good enough? When I talk to certain people that are opposed to the agreement, when it was 5 years, they criticized 5 years. And then it went to 10 years, and they criticized 10 years. It's now 15 years. 15 years will tell whether Iran is capable of change or not. And I believe, again, that we have the technical means to know if there's cheating. And I believe the IAEA, it's 24/7. Obviously, they have to be, we have to put the money in for the IAEA to provide the people to go in and do the oversight. But the way it's set up, Dr. Moniz at least has advised me that he really believes that cheating is minimized to the greatest extent possible. And as a matter of fact, they've had certain of our scientists in Los Alamos trying to practice cheating and see if they could get away with it. And they couldn't. So we'll see.
They cheat well in Iran. But I agree. Let me go back, if I may, a bit. You've been in politics for over 50 years.
No. That's terrible. Ladies, arise. What a gentleman doesn't do that.
You started in elementary school.
Yeah,
You were very successful.
That's better.
In second grade.
That's better.
But I wanted to ask you, over 50 years, and you've partly answered that, how has politics changed in the past 50 years in this country?
It's much more difficult. It's much more polarized. The parties' compromise is much more difficult. We're a two-party system. And when you follow the Constitution, everything, if you want to make a change and you're working with another party, you sit down and you say, how do we do it? What do you need? Well, I can agree to part of that, but I can't agree to all of it. And you work it out. And that's what I have always done. You work it out. And that's how progress comes. And we've done this with big bills. We've done it with small bills. And they've been able to pass. But what's happened is a kind of obstruction that's come into it now. And in the Senate, one person can stop a bill from moving. If the majority leader wants to bring a bill to the floor, and the way our rules work, both sides know that the majority leader is going to bring a bill to a floor, one senator can say, I object. And that means it's going to likely be 60 votes to bring a bill to the floor, and then another 60 votes to get cloture on the bill. And then it's a majority vote to pass a bill. But what this has done, and it's been done by Republicans by the dozens, is essentially obstruct, essentially prevent it, and it's changed a majority into a supermajority. That essentially anything with any element of controversy, you have to have a supermajority to move in the United States Senate today. And it was never that way. When I did the assault weapons legislation, George Mitchell was the leader, and Bob Dole was the ranking member. And Dole got up and said, look, this bill, we should debate it. And we debated it. And there was a motion to table. We won by one vote, 51 votes. Then there were 56 votes to pass the bill out. Went to the House and passed. Doesn't happen anymore. Everything, you got to have 60 votes. That's not majority, that's supermajority. So I am hopeful that we can put that day behind us and go back to doing the people's business and getting things done. But I know when I went to the Senate, I wouldn't have gone out there, certainly my first year, my second year, I've never done it, and put a hold on a piece of legislation that should be debated by the whole body, may have had weeks of committee review and comes out and somebody doesn't want it to move.
I wonder if you ever thought of getting out of politics, and I want to go back, if I may, a long way, to 1978. When you were in your office, you were San Francisco's city supervisor before you were mayor. And Dan White, disillusioned former supervisor, came in and he shot dead Supervisor Harvey Milk and the mayor, George Moscone. And you actually, I think you were the one that discovered Harvey Milk's body. That to me is the ultimate rejection of politics, when you shoot somebody dead for a political dispute. Did you ever think then or later that you wanted to get out of this rough and tumble world?
As a matter of fact, at the time, we had a press room that was right next to the Board of Supervisors. And earlier that year, my husband had died, and I thought I was going to get out of politics. And I came back and came in there, and I said, this may be my last term on the Board of Supervisors. I've run for mayor before. I was convinced I was not electable. And that was it. And then within an hour, the shooting took place, and the world changed.
You heard the bullets, yeah?
Well, I was looking for Dan White because I knew there was a problem. The mayor had called and said he was going to, Dan had resigned. The mayor had called and said he was going to replace him with a man by the name of Don Haranzi at 11 o'clock. It's amazing. This is a long time ago, but it's like it was yesterday. And I was looking for Dan, and he whipped by, and I said, Dan, and he said, in a minute. And I heard the door slam, I heard the shots, I smelled the cordite. I went out of my office, Dan rushed right by me. And I walked into Harvey's office and found his body and put my finger to get a pulse, and there was a bullet hole. He had obviously put his arms up. And then I looked for the chief of police, and he was in the mayor's office, and I learned that the mayor had been slain. And it was just a terrible, dark day in San Francisco. This was the first openly gay public official in America killed by a colleague. Now, if you think of that and the ramifications of it, they're enormous. And so the city fell apart, and the hate, and it was terrible. So my job, the board elected me, and I finished the last year of George's term and kept his administration in place. And then when I was elected my own right in 1980, I made my own appointments, my own chief of police, my own fire chief, those kinds of things. And we moved on, and I learned a big lesson, that cities are best run from the center of the political spectrum, and I really believe that. I believe in the practicalities of politics, less ideology in the city, but much more concern about infrastructure and homeless and schools and the kinds of things that, and the face of the city and the transportation systems. And most people can agree on all of those things. But it was a very hard time in San Francisco.
But you kept at it. You kept at it.
Oh, sure. I'm stubborn. Ask my husband.
Well, let me ask you this. Your term is up in 2018. Will you run for another term in the Senate?
Oh, we'll see.
2013, Edward Snowden, former contractor with the NSA, leaked an enormous amount of classified material. And sort of like the Iran issue, it's very divisive in the United States. There are a large number of people who think he was a hero, a whistleblower who revealed illicit phone tapping by the NSA on American citizens. There are other people who think that his release of that classified information was an absolute disaster and has caused us irreparable damage in our intelligence gathering around the world. You have publicly called Snowden a traitor. What level of damage has he done to us? And I'm wondering, given that a lot of this information is classified, is your judgment on Snowden colored by information that you, as then head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, received that was not known to most Americans?
Probably. I don't respect somebody that takes a job to scrape the system, and that was the purpose. And so it is a form of espionage. And then take that material, and who knows what he did with it, some of which has been released in tranches. He took a lot of material. So where the rest of it is, I don't know. Interestingly enough, he went to China, to Hong Kong, and then to Russia. And I'm sure the Russians would love to have the material, as would the Chinese. But I don't respect him. To me, that's a criminal act. If there's a problem, you know, let's say some people say, well, he was a whistleblower. Well, then he could have come to us. We have staff. We would have taken a look. We would have investigated to see if his claim was valid. But he didn't do that. He released it. Now, has it created damage? Without going into it, yes, it has. Has it cost life? I can't be specific, but it well could have.
U.S. lives?
Pardon me?
U.S. lives?
Affecting military operations as well as other operations, affecting assets, no question. So I know that people think he was a hero. You know, I'm one that believes that America is a great country because we are a good country, because we have a moral and ethical code, and we follow that. And that is really important. My friend George Shultz just gave me a copy of a book that was done about Sakharov, who's the one that was the father of the hydrogen bomb. And it was a great human rights activist in Russia. And there are different chapters, and one is by Jim Mattis, who was a great Marine, 40 years in infantry, head of Joint Forces, head of CENTCOM. And he was asked about this, and he's quoted in this book, and he said, you know, I have been a soldier for 40 years, but I have always followed the law and the moral ethic. And that's what the United States is. We don't do torture. We don't do these other things. And we can't lose our way because we lose our country.
Now, funny you should mention torture.
Well,
because I have here a copy of the Senate Intelligence Committee report on torture, which I read, and is actually quite an extraordinary read. The entire report Eli referred to in his introduction is 6,700 pages long. It's still classified. This is the very short 549-page executive summary, which is heavily redacted. You can see all the black.
7%.
Yeah, all the names, all the good stuff. But you could still work out. It came from 6 million CIA documents, which is equivalent to 6,000 copies of War and Peace, I worked out. And what's interesting about it is the body of the book. There's some description of the torture, which is not pleasant. But the most horrifying thing to me about the book was the attempt to cover it up and to pretend that it was producing results. Talk a little bit, if you would, about what exactly was going wrong in an intelligence agency that not only was committing torture, from what we can see, but trying to pretend that it was having results, which it wasn't.
Well, I think, you know, this goes back to 9/11. And I think there was such a strong reaction, as well there should be, to 9/11. And everybody was out there doing everything they possibly could to ferret out who, why, what, why didn't we know, etc. Who was the progenitor of all of this. And there were some people that obviously were picked up and detained. And so the United States put them at Guantanamo, to which I have been twice, and have the very firm belief it should be closed. And so what the CIA did was rather do this themselves. At a point, they retained 2 contractors, paid them $80 million. They had no background in interrogation. They had no knowledge of the culture. And they ran this program. And it was quite terrible. One person, Abu Zubaydah, who is still in custody, was initially interrogated by an FBI agent by the name of Ali Soufan. And Ali Soufan got a lot of information from him through bonding. And I think there is this belief that you can take Islamic fundamentalists and torture them, and they're going to tell you the truth. That's not necessarily true. But the bonding and the taking the time actually works. And so the upshot is that Senator McCain has been just great on this. And he chairs the Armed Services Committee. And in the Defense Authorization Bill, there is a provision that the Army Field Manual, which is used by the Army, be used as a basis by the government for all interrogation, and that that be regularly updated so that it is very current. General Petraeus helped put that together a few years ago. So I think we're getting that part solved, and I don't think this will ever happen again. The full report is 6,700 pages long, and it is chapter and verse. This is a summary document, and not one thing, ladies and gentlemen, in this document has been contradicted. And yet, you know, when I go back, I expect former CIA directors to attack it. But there is not one thing to date. I think there was one addition of numbers of detainees at one point that needed to be corrected, and we corrected that. But nothing of substance has been contradicted.
Let me drill down a little bit more on this, because I understand the pressure was on the intelligence community to deliver results after 9/11. We were shocked. Who did this to us? I can even understand that you would think, well, let's torture some guys, we'll get information. But when they realized that they were not getting the information they needed, why did the CIA continue to go even up as far as the White House and assure the president on multiple occasions, as is documented in their own documents, that yes, they were getting actionable intelligence from these enhanced interrogation techniques, when they themselves knew they weren't? Why did they continue this conceit for so long? Was it just they were embarrassed to be caught up, or was it
I can't answer that. I don't know. I do believe that, and I know, we never found in our work that President Bush knew actually what was going on. We believe they kept it from him. And we found no indication. I can only tell you what we find. We found no indication of that. And that's part of it. The CIA hired contractors. So you diffuse it, you move it away from yourself. It was not well run. People who did bad things got promotions. And one of the big beefs that we had with them were over pseudonyms. We wanted to use pseudonyms because it showed how often an individual name came up and you could sort of see the pattern. And we couldn't do it. We're down to very few. Even the two contractors are in pseudonym, and everybody knows who they are. But that was a huge mistake. And so one of the things that we have been doing is pushing to downgrade the number of contractors that are used. Something that's an inherently governmental function should be done by the government. They shouldn't be able to protect themselves by hiring people to do bad things.
Before I open up to questions, allow me to ask one more question about our own great state and its drought. Does the federal government have some rain dance that you guys can do?
Somewhat?
A rain dance or something?
No. No rain dance.
Can you help? My lawn is brown right now.
Yeah, right. Well, let me talk about that. I think there's no question that the climate is changing. There's no question that weather is changing. It's much more volatile. We've had funnel clouds in the Pacific, where in my lifetime I don't remember any. We've had hurricanes and tornadoes in this country that have done tremendous damage in areas. And we see our major source of water, which is the Sierra Nevada snowpack, disappearing. People down here are very lucky because you are served by the Metropolitan Water District is very good. They have reservoirs, they store water, And much of the rest of the state doesn't have those reservoirs to be able to store water. So we have been trying, I've worked for a year now on a drought bill that might pass, and I think Senator Boxer and I now have one that has a good chance. It has both some short-term movement of water, to transfer water, to get it to communities that don't have any water, that kind of thing while the drought goes on. And it has some long-term, like desalination, that there are some, I think it's around 24 desal plants that we'd authorize. There are 105 recycling projects that we would reauthorize. We authorize some storage. And so it's a little over $1 billion, but the water infrastructure for our state, ladies and gentlemen, was built by Pat Brown in the mid-60s. We were 16 million people. We're now 38 million people and moving up, and it's the same water infrastructure. So we have to make a change if the state's going to grow, if business is going to grow, if we're going to retain our farming in our cities. And that means desalination, it means recycling, it means groundwater recharge. We have places in the Central Valley, if there was an earthquake, the ground could drop 60 feet because so much of the groundwater has been pumped out for crops. And so we need to move. And what I've been trying to do, we have a bill, it's now in the Energy Committee. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska has been very helpful. She's the chairman of the committee, and we hope to move it this fall.
None too soon. Alexander here has a microphone. If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hand up, and he'll come and get you.
Hi, my name is Betty. I'm an undocumented mother. I have a mixed family, one U.S. citizen, one U.S. resident, and one documented. Now I am in the limbo. And, I'm here because I want to ask you two questions. This is California is one of the largest states with undocumented migrants. And I know that you're going to introduce, I heard that you have a statement that you want to introduce or support an immigrant law that will separate families from their loved ones. And are you going to do that? Are you going to separate my family?
The question is, are you supporting a bill that will separate immigrants' families?
Supporting a bill that would what?
That will separate immigrants' families, I guess send some people back.
No. I've supported the Senate Immigration Reform Bill, which passed the Senate, which may come up again. I do not support the separation of families.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Madam Senator, it's a big pleasure to have you in this beautiful part of California. It integrates entertainment, technology, tourism, but also space and aerospace business. I happen to be an entrepreneur in space who is developing next to Vandenberg Air Force Base, California Space Center. And because of that, I have a very close relationship with our space and aerospace industry. You spoke so beautifully about the strength of our country. Part of this is our space program, which hasn't been greatly supported at the level of Washington, D.C., NASA budgets, etc. We entrepreneurs are finding our own way to make a difference.
Can you make the question, please?
Yes, the question is, what can we count on in Washington, D.C., as far as aerospace and space program is concerned? Will you support betterment of the conditions for those industries here in California?
How can you support the aerospace industry in California?
Well, I pretty much always supported the aerospace industry in California, but it depends on the specific projects. We are facing sequester, which will mean a substantial additional cut across the board in all budgets. And that's a real problem. So that problem has to be solved before the end of the year. The unfortunate part about it is it's an election year. Well, you know, the election is starting, and it makes a solution more difficult. So come the fall, we're going to have some very big problems, one of which is to get a transportation bill, which is 6 years, which is funded. We do not currently have that. It's just been postponed. And then to deal with the sequester problem, which is going to be extraordinarily difficult without additional revenues. And that is, you know, translates into taxes. So there are going to be cuts, most likely.
Thank you, Honorable Feinstein. I'd like if you could elaborate a bit more on the Jacopa treaty with Iran. In particular, there's just two things: the faulty intelligence, possible possibilities.
Could you move that a little bit further from your mouth? I think it'd be easier to hear.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yeah,
Thank
better.
Sorry.
What is the question?
My two questions are about the Jacopa agreement, the Iran treaty agreement.
What agreement?
The Iran.
Oh, Iran, okay.
The Iran agreement. And the two questions are the possibilities of faulty intelligence on this idea that they may have 3 months to nukes. And the other part is the military zones that we're not labeled, and the inspectors are not able to go into those areas. How are we going to get around that issue? Thank you.
Well, the military area that you're talking about is Parchin, and that goes back to 2003, 2004. And the belief is that they did have a program there. That area has been pretty much cleaned up, although they have seen some additional, I've seen the overheads, and it's really not very much, but it's a little bit of movement, a few cars coming in, et cetera. I don't really believe, I mean, I think that the IAEA has an agreement with them, which is separate, to see that that site is permanently immobilized. And I think that's going to get done. So I think the basis of the agreement is that the centrifuge level drops down dramatically. The uranium level drops down dramatically. Neither level is capable of making a bomb the way it is. And it'll be 24/7. They've worked out a way of coding and stamping and working on it. So it's a complicated agreement. But Iran has to complete all of the structural changes they have to make with uranium, with plutonium, with centrifuges, with the Arak reactor, which is filled with cement, prior to any sanctions relief. So the program has to be immobilized before they get any of their money back that's sequestered in Japan or other places based on the sanctions relief.
You've recently spoken about the need for greater reporting for drone strikes and their use on targeted civilians, or the civilian fatalities and collateral damage. Do you think there should be greater public debate about who qualifies as a target and how that decision is made?
Very good question. And this whole issue of drones presents a real difficult problem for me, because drone warfare could be catastrophic. Drones are a perfect assassination weapon. Drones can be outfitted with all kinds of munitions. They can fly high, and they can hit with precision. And it's of deep concern, and it's all anonymous. So there are two different places that this is in. The CIA, we monitor their program. Our staff has probably made 60, 70 visits They go real time, they watch it, they look at the intelligence, they see the patients. And this is a program that the CIA does well. They've got patience, they minimize collateral damage. This is all classified, I can't tell you, but I watch it like a hawk to see that it's low. I have a big concern about military using it. Pilots come, pilots go. There's a strike, people move quickly, and collateral damage has been much higher with the military than with the CIA. The overall issue of using drones at all is a very profound one, and one which really troubles me. We have a whole list of nations that want to buy drones now, and I have been an obstruction to that, and yet the administration, I think, is going to go ahead with one drone sale to an ally. I'm very worried about the program, because if you look back at the Manhattan Project and these huge bombs that were developed, which the legacy of which is still with us. I mean, if you look at a bomb that's 400 kilotons as opposed to the bomb at Hiroshima, which was maybe 15, and killed 200,000 people outright. That program, which was so applauded early on in the 40s and 50s, is now more controversial. The drone is just beginning. And yet, if you think of a war of drones, it could be terrible. Anonymous. And so a number of us on intelligence, Senator Burr is the chairman of the committee, and we share the same view on this, and that is to restrict it as much as possible. And that's what we're trying to do.
Let me just follow up on that, if I may, because if I understand what you said correctly, you have more confidence in the CIA's drone program
Yes, I
than
do.
the military. But as you know, a lot of critics of the drone program have said we shouldn't have the CIA doing it at all because it's covert. We should transfer it all to the Pentagon where it can be transparent and we can follow it. You have a different view on it.
I know what the process is, and it is careful, it is considered, it is watched. There is a target list, and they go after the worst of the worst. And they carry it out, and they have patience. They can track and track till nobody's around. Military's a little bit different. Also, they've been at this for 9 years, so they have trained people. It's not like you put a hotshot pilot in there for 3 months and then he's out and another pilot comes in, which is kind of the military turnover. And while I was chairman, I began this oversight effort. And it's done on a bipartisan basis, and both parties feel the same way about it. On the Intelligence Committee, we're 15 people, 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and we watch it very carefully. Wouldn't have the same ability to watch it if it were a military program.
You get to see stuff we don't get to see, I guess. You get to see stuff we don't see on the Intelligence Committee. Please, go ahead.
But you have a good point, so thank you.
Hello, Senator Dianne Feinstein. My name is Cynthia, over here.
I can't
And I have a personal question to ask of you. As a young professional aspiring to be like you or in a similar position, what is your advice? And secondly, what motivates you?
Okay, good question. Young female professional aspiring to serve the community. Start locally. Don't think you can just jump into a federal race with no experience. Start locally. If it's a school board, a city council, take it seriously. Think big. Think about things that need to be done, not have a vision. And if you want to run for a school board, run for the city council, run for, and get your portfolio of expertise. Do your apprenticeship. One of the problems that we have, I think, are women that think they can automatically run for the top office without doing that apprenticeship. And some win and most lose. So that would be my advice. I think the world is your oyster. It's very different. When I was your age, the world was very different. It was very hard to run. Now, women embrace other women. And it's just great to see. That was different when I first ran in 1969. I could just see it in women's eyes. You know, why are you doing this? You must have a bad marriage. Why aren't you home with your child? That kind of thing. That's all gone. And women will support other women, and they will contribute to women. And that's all new. So it's great.
Let's take one more question.
Thank you, Senator. I assume that part of the distrust of the military's handling has to do with the wedding strike in Yemen in 2013. But my question is about the anthrax problem, that it's been distributed to 194 labs, the live version of anthrax, inadvertently, and to all 50 states and to multiple countries. And apparently nobody has yet been held accountable for that error. What's going on with holding accountable the military for that particular error?
I really can't tell you what's going on, I'm sorry to say, with anthrax.
Let's go for
That's-
one more. I understand you.
What, do you know?
You can't talk to that. I don't know much about it either, but let's take one more.
I'm sorry. I can, if you give me your name, I'll find out and let you know. Okay.
Senator, I'm Donna Cohen.
Hi, Donna.
Hi. And I have been for diplomacy for so long. I feel that's so much better of a way to go than obviously anything else. But I'm undecided on the Iran deal right now. As a Jew, I feel tremendous love for Israel. And I wonder if you think any of the other countries that are in on the agreement have that much of a concern for Israel?
Well, I think this. I think we have Israel's back. I think it is possible to, there is a military agreement that comes due in 2017. I think Nick Burns wrote about it this morning in the New York Times. I think there are ways that we can be additionally helpful to Israel. I think over this president's tenure, some $25 billion has been appropriated for Israel, and I think we can provide it with all of the defense and protection, and I think, you know, we will have Israel's back. There's no question about that. I think the administration should continue to try to put together Arab countries that can be helpful with this, and there's certain equipment that we haven't provided for Israel that might be worth providing, that can add a very strong defensive dimension. So there should be no question. America has been there for Israel for decades, and this is one of the things that bothers me about this, that some people, well, you know, you're sacrificing Israel. That just is not so. As a matter of fact, you sacrifice Israel if you do nothing. And if this thing were to be defeated and not go ahead, what does anybody think would happen if Iran broke out? It would be war. It would be war, a big war in the Middle East. That's how it would end up. So you're right, Donna. Try this diplomacy. This isn't slipshod. This thing has taken 2 years to put together. And the problem with it is it's complicated. And I sincerely believe that every pathway is blocked. Now, we have to keep it blocked. And we can do that. And we have the means to do it.
Do you think any of the other countries care as much as we do for Israel?
Well, you know, as many have said, America is really the leader. And as I've talked to people and diplomats and ambassadors have been on the Hill from the European countries and really talking about this, and if America is strong, the rest of our allies will be strong. But nobody should ever think that America's leadership isn't valuable. It is. It's the one country whose might, whose values, whose well-being is in a position to provide strong leadership. And it's really important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Okay.